I say there's nothing wrong with you and there's nothing wrong with your mind. Your mind works perfectly fine. It's just got some glitches and error messages we're going to reboot and reset
That's beautiful.
and bring it back into homeostasis, the normal operating process that it's supposed to be operating in. So that really, same with addiction. I say the same thing. We got to stop shaming and guilting these people in addiction. They're in pain.
They're in so much pain.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Eat Real to Heal podcast. I am Dr. Nicolette Richer, and today's conversation is a powerful bridge between the physical body and the mind. My guest today is Dr. Don Wood, a clinical psychologist who developed his revolutionary approach to healing trauma after his own daughter was diagnosed with not one, but two incurable autoimmune diseases. What he discovered: the direct link between unresolved trauma and chronic illness, and this changed everything. We're talking about why anxiety and depression aren't life sentences, but glitches in the nervous system, and how a simple reset can allow your body's innate ability to heal and to finally take over. So let's dive in.
Okay. Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Eat Real to Heal podcast. I am your host, Nicolette Richer. And on today's show, I'm really excited to welcome the wonderful Dr. Don Wood. Welcome.
Hi, Nicolette. I was excited to be here. I love your topic. I love what you do. So I was excited to share, what we do and how we can help each other.
Well, I love it because everything that you do complements the work that I'm doing. I'm more very much in the practical, on the ground, physical space with my clients, teaching them how to use food as medicine to reverse their chronic diseases, regenerate their organs, their tissues. Like, it's very much, biochemistry, chemistry, physical. But on the flip side, I'm working with humans. And every human has trauma. Every human has a past. Every human has hopes, dreams, and desires for the future. And so you're never, as anybody who's in the nutrition space or, the chronic disease reversal space, you're not just dealing with the physical body. You are working with the whole human, which incorporates the mental, the spiritual, the emotional side, and all of our memories as well, of all of our experience that we have. So can you let our audience know I want you to summarize what it is that you do, because you are slightly different than, a lot of other, trauma specialists out there, therapists that are out there, coaches. So if you could just summarize what you do for them, and then I want to get into some really nitty-gritty specifics with you.
Excellent. Yeah. So I think what we do, which is really different, is I came in from a completely different angle on this. I came in because my daughter had Crohn's. She had also a second autoimmune disorder called idiopathic pulmonary hemosiderosis, which was a potential death sentence. And I wasn't even in this. And that my wife said to me, you need to figure this out or we're going to lose our daughter. So I went back and researched, went back, got my PhD, and figured out that this was coming from trauma that we didn't even know she had. We weren't aware of the trauma that she'd had at 6. And so that was creating these autoimmune issues. So when I started to look at it, as I said, they're not fixing her Crohn's. In fact, they told us there's no cure for Crohn's. They don't even know what causes Crohn's, and she's just going to have to manage this for the rest of her life. She ended up having 4 resections done. They cut out about 24 inches of her intestines and said she'll eventually end up with a colostomy bag. That was their answer. And so they just had her on constant steroids. They had her on antidepressants, anti-anxiety meds, and nothing was fixing anything. So what I said is, why aren't they fixing it? And so that's where I came in from. And I think the advantage was I'd always been an entrepreneur. So if you want to solve a problem, send in an entrepreneur to fix the problem. Right?
So true.
So that's what I was always pretty good at, is finding niches and finding ways to do things differently. And that's what I did. So my response to people when they deal with trauma is, what I say is, I don't want to teach you how to live and manage and cope with your anxiety and depression. I'm going to show you how we can fix it. it's a glitch, it's an error message, and we can reboot the system. And as you know, Nicolette, our minds and bodies are designed to heal. So let's figure out how to heal it, not how to manage its disease and manage its illness.
Yeah, no, and that's exactly it. And I was just on a group coaching call just before this. And so I'm glad that you're bringing this up, because I was talking about this course on self-love that I'm taking. And, we all use the word, self-love and trauma. And, we all have this idea of what these words mean, but it's not until you embody it, right? It's not until every cell in your body knows it. You're living it out each and every day. And so there's that disconnect between what we know but what we actually do, right?
Yep.
And then the stress associated with that as well, like even just the anxiety of figuring out what is self-love, figuring out what is trauma, and understanding it and going through that whole process, right? There's stress that's on the body, and then how that impacts us physically is also one of the challenge. But I was just telling my students, I was like, I really think if we could all just heal that underlying stress that affects our nervous system, like you wouldn't probably even need, we should all eat healthy. We should all eat nutrients. So we should all detoxify our body. That's important. But I think that it would just make the program we do that much more effective and that
Well,
much.
you're 100% right. Let me share with you. I grew up with zero trauma. Now, that sounds hard to believe, but my wife said we were the perfect petri dishes because I knew what the model was. I'd lived the model all my life. I had parents that never argued, never fought, never yelled at us, never hit it. It was the most nurturing environment you could imagine growing up in. And I had no physical or emotional or sexual trauma growing up as a child. And so I just sort of skated through life. I was healthy my entire life. And I did not eat a perfect diet. I ate a typical British diet because my dad was British, right? So it was like bacon and grease and steaks and all of those kinds of things. And I grew up and I eat good, but I don't eat perfect. And I've lived in Florida for 30 years, never seen a doctor. And I believe that my nervous system being healthy keeps my immune system healthy. And so even though I may put something in that may is not the best thing, I don't do anything bad, but my system can handle it, can take a little bit of a workload. I sort of joke, I don't know if you remember the old Maytag repairman, never having anything to do, right? So my immune system is like the Maytag repairman. It's like, oh, good, something's here. We can start working on it.
Well,
Right.
and that's a really beautiful thing that you bring up, because of the fact that, from the neuroscience perspective as well, our default mode network, which, really operates in our prefrontal cortex, it's, they've seen that individuals who are consistently, thinking and living in the past or thinking and living in the future, two places where most people do not remember their past in a positive way. They tend to just, think about the past from all the things that went wrong, all the things that they didn't do, the shame, the guilt, the trauma, and then they think about the future in the same way. They're afraid of the future. Nobody's really thinking like, oh, tomorrow I'm going to have a lovely walk. It's going to be so peaceful. I'm going to meet somebody. We're going to engage in a beautiful conversation. They're often thinking like, oh, am I going to be able to pay the rent? Am I going to be able to pay the mortgage? Like, or what's going to happen? Or, and a subject we'll get into, especially for a lot of women, like, is this going to be the day that I get sexually abused, or there's going to be another trauma? So if we're constantly living in the past and the future in this unhealthy, negative way, which puts the stress in our body, right?
Yep.
We're not living in the present moment. And present moment is a moment of just peace. It's observation, but as opposed to these other two areas, which are just judgment, it's very subjective. So there's a difference between those two places. And what they found are people in the past and who are thinking about the future in the past so much, they have higher rates of depression, anxiety, all of this. And then, of course, when they have that, we have complete total body system dysregulation, all levels.
Yep.
And so,
Yeah, and that's one of the things that I talk about is if you have had a lot of trauma in your experience in your life, your mind uses those experiences to filter through to respond to the present moment.
yeah.
That's where the glitches are coming in. So your mind is going back saying, what do we know about these kinds of experiences? What do I know about this particular situation? Starts looking at memory from 10 years ago. the subconscious survival brain sees everything in real time. So it activates the nervous system because it's looking at old data. That's what I talk about.
Yeah.
And I say, but we can update that. We can reset that old data so it doesn't activate the nervous system.
Mhm.
And then that brings about the ability to stay in the present, right? And if there's a threat in the present, you're designed to handle that. That's your fight or flight response.
Yeah.
You should not be in that system unless there's a threat.
Yeah, no, that's really well put. So I want to go back to you as a parent. Okay. So you have this child. I really wish we had met when your daughter was, because Crohn's disease is reversible. Um,
Mhm.
and and with just really easy nutrition. But we're not going to talk about that today because that's what our whole show is about. We're going to talk about you. But I want to know about you as a parent, you and your wife at that time when your daughter was going through that, and you had not yet, thought about the link between trauma and her disease and her illness. What was that like for you? Like going through that manic, because that must in itself be a slight trauma. A lot of people experience medical trauma. Or how did you navigate that time?
It was very difficult. I think the advantage for me, though, was because I had really had a pretty regulated nervous system. I didn't get overly stressed. My wife had trauma as a child, so
Hmm.
she was constantly stressed out about it. And me, I could sort of keep it, in check a lot,
Yeah.
even though it was stressful. At the same time, I said, there's got to be a solution to this. But it was frustrating because everybody said the same thing. Like, there is no solution,
Hmm.
right? You just have to take her off of dairy and gluten and blah, 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 blah. But none of that worked. And that wasn't helping her. So what I did discover, so that was her first autoimmune disorder. And like I said, had 4 resections done. Her second one was the lung disorder with the hemosiderosis. And so basically they said, again, there's no cure for that. We don't even know what causes it. And so what I discovered through my research was that this unresolved trauma creates inflammation. Inflammation is the response to trauma. Then the inflammation compromises the immune system and compromises the neurotransmitters.
Yeah.
It's actually affecting the way the DNA is being read and transcribed. So I just wrote my 4th book and I called it Don't Mess with My DNA.
Nice. That's a good title.
And that's what I'm talking about, is we don't realize how much the gene expression changes when trauma is running in the background. So it's amplifying the inflammation, for the genetic expression and inflammation. It's pulling down the immune system lower. It's also taking the neurotransmitters, neuroplasticity. All of those genes are being affected, but it's supposed to be a temporary situation until the trauma is over. The
Hmm.
trauma keeps running in the background. So there's where my daughter's Crohn's stayed active. So
Hmm.
once we resolve the trauma, right, then we fix the Crohn's. She doesn't have Crohn's anymore. She
Right.
doesn't have the lung disorder anymore.
Yeah.
And but had we not done that, she would have she would have been with a colostomy bag, and the hemosiderosis was a potential 5-year death sentence.
Right. Wow. So and what is hemosiderosis? This is a disease actually I haven't heard about.
Yeah, so basically it's where the iron in the blood, the immune system dumps the iron into the lungs. So
Oh,
her lungs started filling up with blood. She was coughing up blood.
right.
And so they had her in ICU for 3.5 weeks, and they came back with this diagnosis. And only 1 in 1.2 million people get it. It's very rare.
Yeah.
So in the entire country, there's maybe a couple hundred cases. So there's no research into it.
Right.
So they just said, their advice was she should live close to a hospital because her lungs could fill up in 15 minutes.
Oh my
Right?
goodness.
That was their strategy.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Which is
put her on
often this. And so they put her on steroids. Okay. So then, and how old was she when she got that diagnosis?
So 14 with the Crohn's, and I think she was about 22 with the hemosiderosis.
Wow. Okay. So at this time, I'm imagining she's not like, hey, mom, dad, I have trauma. So how did you get to this place to discover that?
It was really through when I started going back to research, right? And I started making connections between all these people with autoimmune disorders, and they were telling me about all their trauma. And so then it was like sitting down and saying, have you had anything like this? And she
Mhm.
said, yes, when I was 6, I had sexual abuse. She'd never told us.
Right.
So my wife was devastated
Of
because my
course.
wife was like, how could this happen on my watch?
It
Like,
happens a lot. Yeah.
oh, it's the #1 pandemic in the world.
Yes.
It truly is. And it is the result of, you know, men not understanding the damage that they're doing. It's a very selfish thing. And
Yeah.
it's very sad that women are having to deal with this. And men deal with it as well. So I'm not saying that it doesn't happen to boys as well.
But
But
substantially higher rates yeah, for women and underreported for men. So in the end, we don't totally know, but we do know that, yeah, this affects women and girls.
yep. Well, I didn't know when I was growing up that a lot of my friends were being sexually abused. We had 2 teachers in our school that were abusing kids, 2 principals, and the guy who ran our Little League for 35 years. And nothing happened to me.
Yeah.
So I had no idea it existed. And so this was news to me when I found out that my wife had dealt with it. And I only found out about that before we got married. I met her at 18, we got married at 19. And before we got married, she said to me, I've got to share with you what's happened to me because maybe that'll make you feel differently about me. And I'm like, oh my gosh, Nicolette, they got bodies buried in the backyard or something. This must be really big. I mean, that's how she felt about it. And so she said, I want to share this with you because I don't want you to find out afterwards. And then you feel like, oh, if I'd have known that, I wouldn't have married you. But that's not how I felt at all.
No, and this is the part that's I hear that story over and over again, especially for women of, your wife's generation, which is probably pretty similar in age to mine, but and then my parents as well, because there's shame is attached to it, whereas now, thank goodness, women can talk about it more. Some,
Yep.
I don't, I'd love to know the rates on the percentage of women who are sexually abused that feel that they can talk about it to other people versus the ones that stay silent about it. I imagine it's still a very high rate of silence, but especially at that generation, they didn't talk about miscarriages. They didn't talk about sexual abuse. They felt it was, it was something to be ashamed of if that happened to you. It's like, just like divorce and everything else. We're in a different time, but we still have a long way to go.
Yeah. And
Sure.
even in other countries, I had one lady tell me about in the country she was in, that if you reported it, you had to have enough money to prosecute the person. So if your family accused that person, right, and couldn't afford for the prosecution to prosecute it, right, nothing would get done. And you would then shame the family and put yourself through all the ridicule. So what woman wants to do that? That most of these women are living in, not most, I mean, a lot of women who are living in poverty certainly couldn't afford to report it.
Well, and that's happening right now. I was just mentioning for our listeners right now, I can't remember the number of which podcast it is, the episode, but we interview a woman here in Canada who was sex trafficked, and she managed to escape, and now she's living a beautiful, healthy life. She's got 2 kids. But the thing is, though, is that she had to go to court. It was someone they knew, and in 99% of cases, it's often someone that the victim knows, that it's a family member, it's a friend, it's someone that they know. And so but the whole thing is, when they went through court, it had nothing to do with him. It was all about proving that she didn't want the sexual abuse to happen, or that she didn't like the sexual abuse. And when she was telling the story, I'm just like, I couldn't believe it. And we see it all the time. So we have someone who abuses somebody, but then it's the victim who is almost like they're on trial,
Yeah.
trying to defend themselves, to tell the story over and over. And then of course, they get re-traumatized how many times?
Yep.
Like, it's a horrific process. And of course, we have a judicial system that was created by men. And of course, that's how this works. Whereas in any other system that I think was lovingly created, we would not do that to the victims of sexual abuse.
No, and that's where the education has to come in. Men have to start understanding what other men are doing and start standing up.
Yeah.
right? Because not all men are going to do that.
No.
Obviously, I grew up in a beautiful home. My brother and my dad were total gentlemen, all the time. My sons, same thing. But a lot of men don't understand. Here's something really scary, Nicolette. I was at a conference and there was a guy, very, very wealthy business guy. And he had hired a whole team, Navy SEALs, Rangers, stuff like that, to go in and rescue some of these children from the sex trafficking rings. And he said, so I go with them and I'm there. And I said, you must stand out. He's a white guy, good looking white guy. And he goes, oh no, they use me as the guy to go in and get the kids. And I
Yes.
said, you? And
Yeah.
he goes, yes. He says, because the Canadian and American businessmen are
Yeah.
the ones going there and doing this.
Yeah.
Right. And he says, and I easily get in.
Yeah.
No problem.
Yeah. Wealthy white men. And this is oh man, there's so many good documentaries out. I just can't even, like, there's so many. And it's really important to show these documentaries to your partner, to your children. They're really hard to watch for sure, but it is important because one of the statistics that they were giving at the end of one of the documentaries is how child sex trafficking is the largest, fastest growing industry now on the market. It surpasses cocaine, it surpasses everything. And the reason is because they say you can take a bag of cocaine and you can sell it one time, right? Once you're sold, it's gone, it's out of your hands. Where if you take a woman, and in cases, yes, boys and men, and if you take a young girl, you can sell them over and over and over again, multiple times a day for years and years and years.
Yeah.
And this is something we have to be doing the work, not just with the victims, right? Because yes, 100%, but also, like you said, we have to be educating our sons, our partners, our businessmen, absolutely everybody. Like this is such a systemic issue right now.
And good men are the ones who have to come up and stand up and start
Yeah.
doing this. And I think that's the education. I think that's women can't do it on their own because it's going to take the men, unfortunately, to make the changes.
Yeah.
And we have to educate them as to what the damage is being done. And so, if good men stand up, I think we can make a big dent in this.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. And we need all of these resources, like with the tools that you have. And, we have psychedelic therapy on the rise as well. And that's, it's incredible, but it's going to be interesting to see how it's used. Yeah, for the perpetrators as well. Yeah, and I mean, and I always say we're still such a young society when it comes to understanding this, because 100 years ago, like we only had vehicles really on the road, like the 1920s, and we still had like bandits on horseback that were, you could just shoot somebody for stealing your lunch, and the sheriff would be like, no problem,
Yeah.
that, so that was just 100 years ago. So we have gone literally from being slightly barbaric in a lot of ways, dying from rattlesnake bites, to now, having Teslas and electric cars, and, understanding that, women have rights. Like that's something very new in our society, understanding that children have rights, understanding that, we can't marry off 13-year-olds to, 60-year-olds, even though the state of California still allows child marriages.
I know. The stuff in this country, you can't believe that are
Yeah,
going on, right?
I
And the
know.
age of consent from different states, right?
It's terrible.
Children can't consent to,
No.
to sexual activity. They just don't have, their brain is still developing. I
Mhm.
need to just understand we're living longer, so there's no rush to marry off a young girl to have children.
Yeah.
Right. So let's let her, take some time to enjoy her childhood before we start trying to put her into a marriage. Like,
Exactly.
yeah.
Exactly. So okay, let's go back. I know we're jumping topics, but these are really important topics that I'm not sure how many different podcasts are covering them, but I'm really glad that we're able to bring this into the Eat Real to Heal show. But let's go back now to your daughter. So you ask your daughter If she experienced any of these things that your clients were talking about, she says, yes, sexual abuse, then your wife also shares that with you. And so then what do you do at this point with your daughter? Like, what was the first step in helping her on her path to recovery?
Well, the first thing was not to think about revenge, because the first action is let's get the pitchforks and chase this
Totally.
person down, right?
Yeah.
But unfortunately, you can't do that. So the idea is, and then this is just great advice for parents. If your child comes and tells you this, don't look like overly angry and shocked,
Yeah.
right? Take it, it's hard. But because, and this is a little off topic, but it'll sort of give you the same perspective. One of the things that they're finding from these school shootings, right? The child ends up with post-traumatic stress from a school shooting, obviously.
Yeah.
But you know where most of the post-traumatic stress they're now realizing is coming from? When they see their parents for the first time.
Wow, of
The
course.
parent is so panicked and so dysregulated that the child is thinking, I'm going to be embraced and safe. And
Yeah.
they're realizing, oh my gosh, there's no safe place.
Well, of course. And I just think about it with if my kid came home, and I saw them for the first time, like I would be riddled with fear, excitement that they're alive, like just the whole like swath of emotions. And then, of course, my body is vibrating with that. And then you go and touch your kid and you hug them and you hold them or you cry or you, whatever it is, like, and the thing is, our kids are so intuitive. They know how we're feeling every moment of the day.
Yeah.
And so then we're putting that, of course, that makes so much sense.
Yeah. And I think so. I mean, my daughter was growing up in a very safe home, very nurturing home. We thought we had a really good communication between us because she would, talk. She had a lot of different like ear infections to it, but that's where all that's coming from.
Yeah.
And so that was a big shock. But
Yeah.
at the same time, right, if you handle it incorrectly, they'll shut down. So
Yeah.
even though it took her that long before she ever disclosed it, that wasn't because we did anything wrong. It's just she did not present with anything that we sort of connected to it. Now I would.
Yeah.
Now knowing what I know, if your child is having a lot of these health issues, right? Think about trauma.
Yeah.
Think about where they're coming from. Now that I know that, right, I would have totally done things. And that's what I talked about in the book, the Don't Mess with My DNA. If I knew what I knew now, I would have done things differently as a parent. And not
Oh,
that I say, I still give myself an A as a parent, but I could have gotten an A plus if I knew some of the things I know now.
that's pretty good. I might be giving myself a C right now as a parent, but
Oh,
and I think I'm doing it pretty well. That's amazing. The thing though is one thing I want to say to the listeners out here who are, the audience who's taking all of this in is that when if your child does come to you and tell you, and also because in my work that's also what comes out when my clients go through their therapy, that they've been sexually abused, and often I'm the first person that they've ever told. And some of these people are in their 60s and their 70s and their 20s, that again come from amazing families, loving parents, but they've never told anybody. But the thing is, number one for the parent is to not make it about yourself. Like, how did I not know? I failed you. Like because all the
right.
game, your own guilt and shame will come in, and your own fears and your own anxiety about this. But that's making it about you. You got to stay in the present moment and hold space for the child because it is about them. Then you got to do your own work, right? Like, so there's no doubt you're going to have to do your own work. But then on the other side as well is, and this has happened to me directly, where I came forward with abuse, and instead I was gaslighted. I was told that it's not possible that that could have happened. And
Yep.
of course you're thinking that because you're like, what are you talking about? I checked all the boxes as a good parent. Like, I kept you safe. I did my work. And so of course your brain can't compute how this can happen. So it's natural to also feel like the child might be lying.
Mhm.
But it's so important to also not do that. So maybe the child is. Probably in a lot of cases they're not. But also just be careful that you don't come in saying that's not possible. This could not have happened on my watch, which is
Absolutely.
also a very natural response for some people. So do not gaslight the victim, like the individual. you have to gather all the evidence, do all of that, do the work. That part's important. And then there was a third point that I wanted to make about that, just based on personal experience, like for parents, like if this is coming in the first time, yeah, it's going to be difficult. So you're going to need to do your work as well.
Yeah. And it will. It'll rock your world, right? Because, like you said, you feel like, what did I do? How did I fail? But what you have to understand as a parent, which I truly do understand now, is this sexual abuse is sinister. They
Oh,
are so good
they're
at
so
hiding
good.
it, right? So, they're like, internet hackers. You don't even know they're in there. You have no idea that they're in the system. You have no idea. So it's important to talk to your children about it and look for things and sort of be observant. And that's one of the things that I do talk about as well in the book is there. Now I look back on it and I go, ooh, I missed that. How did I miss it? And the reason I missed it is because my daughter was such a happy, loving kid. I mean, she was the one that would just run at you and jump in your arms, and she wanted to be around us, all the time. So she wasn't the typical kid that, wanted to get away from her parents. She wanted to be around her parents. But, she was also scared at night.
Yeah.
So that fear at night, she wet her bed, little things like that. So there were signs,
Yeah.
but again, she's also an actress. So she's a phenomenal actress. So she knew how to play the role of I'm the perfect little girl in this home because she was growing up in the world that I grew up in a very nurturing, loving. So in her mind, she can't be the problem.
Right.
And if she discloses this, because of being so young, she's made to feel like she did something wrong. That's what these people do so well. They made her feel like she was the bad person,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah,
And
sexual abuse starts purely from it. The perpetrators they literally should have PhDs in mind manipulation, because really that's what it comes down to. Like they know every psychological thread to pull, and they know how to keep you quiet. They know how to make you feel like you're the problem, that you're the one who wanted it, or you're the one who asked for it, or that you're the bad person. And this is what we need to understand, is that when our children don't tell us, it's because they are now wrapped up in this mind game that
yeah,
was started by this individual who really is the criminal here. And I know that was the case for me. That for me, I only processed my rape when I was 44 years old.
yeah,
Before that, I was like, well, it couldn't have been rape, because I guess I'm the one, like I took full responsibility for it. I was in the wrong place at the wrong time. And I was like, how did that even happen? Like, and I think I'm a very intelligent person. Like I have a PhD too. Like how the hell and I know a lot about sexual abuse. I've read the books, I've watched the documentaries, and I'm like, it still got me thinking that I was the person to blame 40, that many years later.
Hey, beautiful humans. Scott here from Team Richer Health. Let's get real for a moment. We're living through a mental health crisis. Rates of anxiety, depression, and PTSD are higher than ever. And for so many people, the usual treatments just aren't working. That's why I want to talk to you about psychedelics. That's right, psychedelics. It's a hot topic right now, and honestly, I love that we're finally having this conversation. It's not about the party stories, it's not about the stigma, but the real evidence-based healing. For centuries, traditional cultures have used plant medicine to heal. Now science is catching up, with thousands of studies supporting that psychedelic therapy can help people with mental health disorders, anxiety, depression, and also those seeking deeper creativity, spiritual growth, resilience, and an overall well-being. That's all of us humans. Dr. Nicolette Richer is a certified psychedelic therapist, and she describes it as one of the most beautiful additions to her healing work. Over the years, she's had the privilege of guiding people through safe, ceremonial plant medicine sessions, and what she's witnessed is nothing short of profound. Talk about profound. I've experienced this firsthand, freedom from trauma that's held me hostage for years, finding laughter, peace, grace, and a life's purpose. Something I was yearning for decades. This isn't fringe anymore, it's real. It's happening, and it's raw and beautiful. And if you want to dip your toes into this universe, I recommend watching How to Change Your Mind by Michael Pollan on Netflix. It's a beautiful documentary that explores the history, the science, and real potential of psychedelics. If you're feeling the call, and if you're curious but unsure, you can book a free consult with Dr. Nicolette Richer. Let's see if this might be the path forward for you. You'll find the link in the show notes, or you can contact us directly at richerhealth.ca. Thank you so much for listening.
So,
Well, even with my wife, like I said, when we were 19 going to get married, she wanted me to know this. So she sat down and she shared it with me. And I was just like, she goes, does that change your mind? And I said, absolutely not. You were a child. How in the world would that change my mind? But that's how she was thinking. So at the time I didn't understand it. I go, why would you think I would think that?
yeah.
Right. And again, it's news to me. But here's what she said right after that. She says, okay, I'm glad you feel that way, but you have to make me a promise now. And I said, what's that? That you'll never tell anybody what I shared with you.
Right.
You have to promise me that you'll never share it. Imagine the fear and a 19-year-old, right, about anybody finding out. And I said, but why would that? And I asked her, I said, why would that matter? She's because they'll judge me. They'll judge my family. Now everybody knows her story.
Yeah.
Right? Because if it wasn't for her and my daughter, I would never have developed this program.
Right.
They were not only the inspiration, but the education for me. Right.
Wow.
I learned so much from what they had experienced, and I had zero. Right. And so they taught me everything about this.
That is amazing. That yeah, they were your muses in this. So let's go back again. I keep on saying, okay, let's go back to the daughter, and then we go off in these beautiful, beautiful directions, which are so important because that's what makes up the whole story. So when you realized the sexual abuse with your daughter, and then did you take her to somewhere, like where did you go first, or did you start working with her? How did she get to being this like incredible human that she, is
No,
today?
I didn't
Through
start
all
working with her because I wasn't doing any of this. So we
that.
obviously, try to take her into therapy and do things like that. Then, she was constantly in the doctor's office because she was so sick all the time. She had colds, infections, plus her Crohn's. I mean, imagine how many times she had 4 resections done, how many times she was in the hospital, right? And she, colonoscopies constantly, all this stuff. And then when the lung one came, then it was like again. And it wasn't until the second autoimmune, which she was much older, that then I started to do the research. And then probably within a few years, but about maybe 2 or 3 years, I started connecting the dots.
Okay.
And that's when I developed the program.
Right.
And so the good news is no more Crohn's, no more hemosiderosis. They're both gone.
Okay, so this is awesome. So let's talk, because I can just hear the audience going like, what's the program? How do we do this? So what is the program? Like, what does it look like for an individual? And what if an individual thinks that they don't have trauma, like they haven't admitted it to themselves yet? So I want to dive into that after you tell us a little bit more about how this works. Like, what is it like to work with you?
So what I developed is a very quick program. I basically take them through a 4-hour process, and it's 4 consistent hours. And the idea is the first 2 hours are all science and education. What I explained to them is, here's what I learned through all my education. Here's what I discovered. And all of this is fixable. Nothing is permanent. Our system is designed to repair. The only reason you haven't been able to repair is because the trauma is running and looping, continually to activate your nervous system, continuing to keep you in an unhealthy state, because your system is trying to deal with the trauma on an ongoing basis, but it's not ongoing. It's just in your mind ongoing. So I say, think of the brain, the physical brain, as the computer. The mind is the software. So if I drop my computer, it can get damaged and affect the way it operates. The mind is prone to glitches and error messages, just like software. And the glitch in the error message is the repeating data being run in the background in the system. which keeps activating the fight or flight response, which creates the inflammation. So the first 2 hours, and one of the first things I say to somebody when they come in, and I have people, Nicolette, cry when I say this to them. I say, there's nothing wrong with you, and there's nothing wrong with your mind. Your mind works perfectly fine. It's just got some glitches and error messages. We're going to reboot and reset.
That's beautiful.
And bring it back into homeostasis, the normal operating process that it's supposed to be operating in. So that really, same with addiction. I say the same thing. We got to stop shaming and guilting these people in addiction. They're in pain.
They're in so much pain.
Yeah.
And I wanted to say something about that too, because those words that you just used, anybody who's listening to this can take those and you can just repeat those back to a loved one when you see that they're in pain, that they're suffering. And it's that you're not broken. There's nothing to really fix. You are going to be okay. Like to let people just know that, because most people are not told that. They're thinking that they're damaged. They're thinking that it's permanent. They're thinking that they're broken. They're thinking that nothing can be done. And just a little bit of hope and just a little bit of comfort, those two things can go a long way with somebody. To just calm their nervous system for even just 5 minutes goes a long way.
And that's why I do the 4 hours, because by the time I'm 2 hours in, I have their brain in a very alpha, relaxed, focused state. And we can do all the updates. So the next 2 hours are all on the techniques to reset the nervous system, reset the memory.
Right.
And so, for example, I had a lady come in who had been on heroin for 7 years. And so what she said when she first came in, she said, I told my therapist that I was coming to see you, and he told me that make sure that you're honest with this man and tell him up front that you have self-destructive behavior. And so I smiled at her and I said, really, what would make you think you're self-destructive? And she looks at me, because this is what she's been told for 7 years. She said, well, I'm sticking a needle with heroin in my arm. Don't you think that's self-destructive? Yeah. I said, no, not at all. I think you're trying to feel better. And I'll bet you when you stuck the needle in your arm, you felt better. She goes, yeah. And I said, that's what you were trying to do.
Trying to survive. That's survive. Self-destructive would have been like you went and threw yourself in front of a car.
Yeah.
Yes.
I said, the substance is destructive, but you're not destructive. You had to figure out a way to stop the pain, and you figured out a way. Now, was it the best resource to stop the pain? No, but you didn't have another resource. So your subconscious survival brain operates in the present. So when does it want pain to stop? Now, in the present. And when you stuck the needle in your arm, the pain stopped now. Problem solved. But the problem is that you repeat it. And what I say, addiction is a code. It's not a disease. Because you repeated it over and over, you built a code, a program that your mind uses to solve its pain problem. And that's why they can't stop it, because the logical, reasonable part of your brain, your conscious mind, cannot override survival threats. If there's a survival threat, you can logically say, well, I shouldn't be taking this drink or using this drug. But the survival brain will say, yes, we are. We're not going to have this pain. We know how to stop the pain. And it works. So people say, why do people use drugs and alcohol? And I said, because it works.
It works. It's the most amazing thing for numbing you out so you don't have to feel that pain. And this is the part where I'm so sad that our education system is designed the way that it is, because this is the stuff that should be brought in so early on to our children in schools, right? To teach our students that, you know what, we kind of are programmed to move away from pain, not to move towards pain, to move away from it, right? Like that is human nature to do that. So and then to let them know that, so they know a little bit more about themselves. So then in the future, when they have the pain and they reach for the alcohol, they reach for the drugs, they go, oh, right, I'm programmed to do this. And so, but this stuff is not taught until we're 40, 50, if at all, ever. Most people have no idea that they're just trying to avoid pain. And it's like, for someone, when you know this, you're like, oh my God, that makes so much sense. Of course, that's why I drank. So then you can ask the next logical thing, what is the pain that I'm trying to avoid?
So the thing that I find that a lot of people misunderstand is they'll say, oh, the reason they go take those drugs or they drink is because they want to get high, right? Yeah. So they're trying to get high. It's a dopamine thing. They want that dopamine hit. So here's the way I explain it. So Nicolette, if you and I were standing beside each other and I shook your hand, I started squeezing it so hard that it was so painful that you went down on a knee because it was hurting so much. And I said, just take a drink out of this glass and I'll let go.
Yeah.
Right. So you take a drink out of the glass and you feel better because you get the dopamine hit because I stopped squeezing. You didn't do it for the dopamine hit.
No.
You did it to stop the pain, but you got a dopamine hit.
Yeah.
Because you felt better, you weren't in pain.
Yeah.
So it's not about getting high, it's about stopping the pain. Yeah. And pain is a major motivator. And so trauma creates emotional pain, right? And illnesses can create physical pain. So there's where people end up looking for relief. Yeah. And then our society shames and guilts them. Right? You shouldn't do that. Well, what are you supposed to do? Give me an alternative.
Yeah.
And what I'm doing in our program is providing a natural alternative. Let your brain, let your mind reset and stop the pain loop. And when we stop the pain loop, and it's really quite, easy to do. Our system is designed to heal. You just have to know how to heal it. So I've created in the 4 hours the tools to reset the trauma so it stops activating the nervous system.
Yeah. And that's the part about us funny little humans is, and we are funny. We're so, we think we know so much about ourselves and we still know so little. But at the same time, the solutions are actually often quite simple. Like people are always so shocked at our program because it's the same thing. I can teach our program in 4 hours to you. And it's interesting, I spend the first 2 hours explaining the science because I think it's important for people to know that and then reassuring them that their body is a self-healing, self-generating machine. So your body doesn't want to be in a disease state. It's trying to find that balance again. And so there's just, we add a few things, we take away a few things, all of a sudden, boom, the illness melts away. And they just can't believe that it's so simple, but it's also because they've been told that it's so hard. Like it has to only be a medical doctor who's got a tool and a scalpel and a pill that's designed in a laboratory that can fix it. And that's not the case.
No, even as an example, one of the things people come in and they'll say, I have depression. And they'll say, tell me what you're angry about. No, well, I'm not angry, I'm depressed. I go, well, depression is anger. I says, let me explain why. I said, if your mind is running this trauma loop in the background, your mind's not okay with that. It wants it to be fixed. Yeah. So how does your mind get you into an action to fix something? It uses an emotion. The purpose of an emotion is a call for an action. So if you have fear, what is your mind asking you to do? Run.
Get the hell out.
Right? If you get angry, what's it trying to get you to do? Fight.
Take action.
Stop.
Yeah.
So if your mind for years has been running this trauma loop from when you were 5 about somebody who hurt you, and it keeps trying to get you to get angry, to fight back, because it's seeing the trauma in real time, and you don't answer the call because you can't answer the call. How does your mind protect you? It shuts down. Depression is the absence of emotions. The emotions haven't got the action that it's been looking for. So to protect you, depression is a function of the brain to stop the pain.
Yeah. Totally
different way of looking at it.
Yeah. And our medical system is taking that and saying, okay, well, let's stop the pain even more by applying all these SSRIs, right? That just make you feel like, in every client of mine that suffers from suicidal ideation, depression, they all say the exact same thing. They're like, it gave them relief. Yes, because the pain of, feeling depressed, which is feeling all those emotions, is too much for them to deal with. So then when they finally take the pill, which again, and I love what you said earlier, that when you don't have other tools, that is your tool, right?
Yeah.
Like, so the alcohol is the tool, the drugs are the tool, the prescription medications are the tool, because you don't have another tool. So that's okay. We get that. But then that's not where we stop. We have to go further.
Yep.
Yeah, because we don't want to just keep numbing.
Even suicide, when people talk to me about they have these thoughts of suicide, I say, I don't believe you want to die.
Yeah.
I just don't believe you figured out another answer to the pain.
Yeah.
And so your mind wants to stop the pain now. Suicide sounds like a solution to the now problem.
Yeah.
Right? But it doesn't mean you want to die.
No. Yeah.
So let's get to the root of the issue, right? And all of these, when people come and say I have anxiety, I have depression, I have whatever, I say those are just symptoms. That's not the problem, but they're going to treat the symptom. I said, let's get to the root of the problem that created the symptom, and then the symptom will go away.
Yeah. And that's a piece that I really hope, all the listeners here, I feel like I want to replay this part over and over and over again, that just this last 30 seconds here, because I see this all the time as well, especially in this day and age. It's like somebody labels you and you wear that label proudly. Like it becomes it's like a neon light on you. And then you're just like, this is what it is, because you feel like it's the answer, right? Your diagnosis is the answer, but it's not the answer.
No,
And it's
no,
somebody's opinion. And it's somebody's opinion who doesn't know that there's another way. So that diagnosis is not even, it's not an actual diagnosis. It's within a body of academia. So whether it's, call it psychiatry, let's call it, even in the trauma informed world, we have a lot of people saying, well, that's trauma, that's trauma, that's trauma, that's trauma. But then I'm like, oh, I'm getting a little bit, and I'd be so curious about your opinion on this, where it's like, now it's like everything is trauma, right? Every little tiny thing is trauma. And, and I think we have to be careful because semantics are really, really important, right? So the
yep,
minute you get a depression diagnosis, doesn't mean
yep,
you're going to be on antidepressants for the rest of your life, and doesn't mean you're going to be depressed for the rest. It just means that somebody decided to give you a label right now, and
yep,
actually they could have given you another label. They could have said you have trauma. They could have said you're actually nutrient deficient. They could have
yep,
said actually you have a lot of toxins in your body. They could actually say you're in an unhappy marriage. They could have said, you know what, your child just died. Like
yep,
there's a whole number of different ways like that you could have been diagnosed if it was any other individual in any other, siloed body of academia.
yep. Well, interesting. I called my second book Emotional Concussions
I saw
because
that. That's good. Tell us about that.
yeah, because not everything is a big T trauma. And what
Yeah.
we'd have is we'd have people come in saying, oh, I saw that you worked with the Boston Marathon bombing survivors, the Vegas shooting. I haven't had anything like that. I say, well, tell me about some of the emotional concussions that you've dealt with. They go, well, what's that? I say, that's the overly critical parent, or the coach that told you you're never going to make it, or the teacher that called you stupid or called you out in front of class. Right. So my wife, Bridget, when she had a number of different emotional concussions as well as the big T trauma. But one of her emotional concussions was she's living in this traumatic household to begin with a father that's just a raving lunatic, right? Very angry man. And she's 6 years of age. And what I say is a 6-year-old doesn't have enough life experience to interpret the world. So she's a 6-year-old. The mothers in the neighborhood put together a tea party. So her grandmother puts her in a really pretty dress, does her hair up. She goes to the tea party. And when she gets there, one of the mothers says, oh my goodness, look at Bridget. She's going to be a real heartbreaker when she grows up. And all the women are going, oh yeah, Bridget's a heartbreaker. Bridget said, I had to go home. I was sick to my stomach. I thought they saw all the bad in me.
Oh, that she was going to break hearts, like as a,
She's going to hurt people.
yes.
That's what she heard. And she sobbed when she told me that story. This is before I have the program developed. She sobbed, like heartbreaking sob,
Yeah.
saying like, I wanted to go to this tea party. I was so excited. And then I thought they saw I was a bad person, which
Yeah.
is how she was feeling.
Well,
That's an emotional concussion.
and I love this term emotional concussion, because now I'm actually seeing, you just reminded me of a story, and I'll call it like an emotional springboard, as opposed to emotional concussion, because when I was 5, my mom got called into the school by my kindergarten teacher and Mrs. Osborne, with me right there talking to my mom as though I don't exist, and I guess I wasn't paying attention to her body language, because all I heard her say was, um, Nicolette is too curious and she asks too many questions. But so that's what my mom years later told me that she said, and like basically was telling my mom that I have to stop asking questions. But I want to tell you what I heard, and it's been the biggest blessing. Is it was an emotional springboard, because I heard the word I heard was curious, and I love the book Curious George,
Oh,
and I
cool.
thought it was a compliment. to be curious. So it actually sprung me into, like, it's why I'm a researcher, I think, because of that moment, because I was like, oh, it's good to ask questions. And this has happened, and I've seen this where two people have had similar experiences, but one takes it and it becomes an emotional concussion, and the other person interprets it in a different way, and it actually helps them and supports them. And so, but I do love this differentiation between the emotional concussion and the big T. And I think we have to be very mindful about the language that we're using, because the weight of the word trauma for some people, just again being defined as having trauma could, now I see it happening that people are like, they're almost stunted. They like don't know what to do because they've been told that they've been traumatized. But I'm like, but have you?
Right. Yep. And that's why sort of it gives a way to sort of explain that this may not have been the trauma because you may identify differently with it. And so it's just a softer way of dealing with it. And it allows them to sort of, look at it a little differently, because there's a lot of those kinds of emotional concussions that happen. Bridget had a number of them. She also had a teacher pull her up in front of the class and fire math questions at her, and she froze. And when I met her, she told me, she goes, school was so easy for you. She saw my report cards and there was a straight A student. And she goes, and I went, yeah, of course it was easy for me. I'm not living in a traumatic household.
Yeah.
She said, I'm not that smart. I struggled in school. She's brilliant. Nicolette, she's my best researcher now.
Right.
Because she's brilliant. She said, I could read a page in a book and not remember one word that I read. I have to reread it again. And it was because of the way her mind was developing as a child. It didn't mean she was stuck there. But for her, until she got this trauma taken out, right? That was the way she saw her world. And those are the kinds of things, even with the best of intentions. This is why you mentioned it earlier, how important it is for parents to understand their language. Because even though you think you're saying the right thing, the child, like, luckily for you, you heard curious, right?
Yeah, so lucky.
But somebody could have heard something totally different. And I had a lady, I do this sometimes in groups. So I'll have a whole group and I'll bring somebody up and do a demonstration of one of the clearings, right? And so I'll take them through the clearing. So she came up, I said, anybody have anything they want to come up and I'll work on? So she came up and goes, I haven't had any trauma. And I was like, why did you volunteer? But anyway, so she came up and I said, can you think of a time in your life where you have an emotion when you think about something? And she thought about it. She goes, okay, yeah, I can remember a time. She goes, I was 6 and I was in church with my family. And she says, and I started talking and I can see her eyes filling up with tears. And she says, and my grandmother took out her hairbrush and hit me on the head and said, stop talking, you're in church. And then the flood came. And by the time she finally was able to talk and catch her breath, this is what she said to me. I lost my voice that day.
Mm-hmm.
I never spoke up. I never fought for myself. I got pushed around my entire life. I didn't realize that's where I lost my voice.
Yeah.
Now, was her grandmother trying to do that? No, right? But a 6-year-old heard it literally.
Yeah.
Stop talking, which you could have done too. Luckily for you, you didn't.
Yeah.
Right? So 2 children in that same circumstance hear 2 different things.
Exactly.
Hi, it's Scott from Team Richer Health, and I'm super excited to share our team's 20-year vision. We will be building Canada's very first chronic disease reversal and mental health disorder reversal hotel and wellness center right here in the heart of the Cowichan Valley, British Columbia. This will be a state-of-the-art, 100% plant-based, integrative health facility, a place for education, healing, regenerative tourism, and sustainable community building. It's more than a wellness center. It's a mission designed to help people around the world reverse chronic disease, overcome anxiety and depression, and return to their families healthy and thriving. This project will also create meaningful work and a lasting impact within a local community charged up for this project. But grand visions require big support. That's why we're inviting passionate investors who believe in healing and global wellness to join us as founding partners in bringing this first of its kind project to life. We would love your support in helping us spread the word. And if you know someone who's passionate about creating real life impact and might be interested in investing, we would love to connect. You'll find all the details in the show notes, or you can reach out to us directly at richerhealth.ca. Thank you for listening, and thank you for being part of this vision.
I feel very fortunate that day that I only heard the word curious and associated with that book. And, and on the flip side too, it's interesting because of that word trauma. Like when I first, really started to explore it, years ago, and I remember going to therapy and feeling like I was taking up space. So I was like, I shouldn't be here. Like, this is an important appointment. There's other people who should be here. And like, what am I even spending all this money on? Like, I don't have trauma. And meanwhile, I grew up in an alcoholic household with a lot of abuse, emotional abuse, verbal abuse, a lot of fighting every single day. Scared child. I was in a halfway house when I was 4, like, waking up in the middle of the night there. And, but all of this stuff is what came through since that day in therapy. But I remember feeling like, well, trauma has to be so big. Like I was thinking you had to be in an earthquake and the building collapsed on you and you were buried. That's what I thought trauma was. I thought it had to be like you were, violently raped versus like, I was gently raped, I guess, or whatever I was thinking.
Yeah.
And so it's amazing how we can interpret all these experiences. And again, because the word trauma felt like you had to have PTSD.
Yeah.
Right.
Yep.
And so that really did mess me up for a long time because I never did seek therapy, even though I look back and I was like, whoa, a lot of my life decisions definitely stem from trauma and my upbringing and all of that. But it took me, again, 44 years to even start addressing it.
It's so true. I have people, I'll give you an example. Another guy came in and he said, my father beat me all the time, but I think it was a good thing. It toughened me up.
Yes.
And I was like, no, that's not a good thing, right? And he goes, yeah, but it made me tougher. I said, I played hockey, right? I was tough. I could fight. We were taught to fight. That's why I didn't get picked on and bullied.
Yeah.
My father never, ever touched me, never yelled at me. I grew up, I mean, that's the kind of world I grew up in. You can raise a child with strength without having to beat them and yell at them.
Yeah.
It's possible. You just have to teach them the right way. And that's how, as an example, even the respect for women, which we, talked about as well. I remember I was about 15 or 16 and I was in the kitchen and I was walking out and my mom had said something to me. And I said it really just this way. I went, all right, whatever. Right. Like that's not, I didn't yell at her. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't swear. Right. I was just, okay, whatever. Right. And as I walked around the corner, my dad was there and he stopped me. And this is what he said to me. She may be your mother, but she's my wife. And I don't allow anybody to talk to her like that. Now stop it. Talk about the way to be raised. Talk about a father that was doing it the right way.
Yeah.
Right. He didn't have to yell at me. You know what was the biggest thing for me is I felt like, oh, I hurt my dad.
Yeah. And it's respect.
I hurt my mom.
You respect in that too, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I never wanted to disappoint him. So that was how he got his respect and got me to do right, to be raised the right way. And my brother was raised the right way, the same thing. And that's how, I did it with my children. That's what we need to teach men. I was fortunate. I mean, I talk about that. Like, I just had this real blessing to be raised, and I was adopted.
Yeah. Wow.
What a break to get into the family that was able to do that for me.
Yeah. So as you're saying this, it's so fascinating because two individuals who can have similar experiences, but then the outcomes also can be very different. So I'm thinking about my husband here, and he, when I met him, he was like, oh yeah, I don't have trauma. I had a perfect upbringing. I had all of this, like my parents were amazing. We went skiing every weekend. We, awesome, awesome, awesome. But then he told me how he developed severe allergies when he was 14. And 3 days after his parents said they were getting divorced. And he was so allergic to the cat that they had to give away the cat. And and this is 22 years ago. I'm looking at my husband and I'm like, and you don't have any trauma from that? And he's like, nope, no, like the cat had nothing to do with it. So here's an individual who's, absolutely, he broke out in eczema all over his body. That was
That
another thing that
trauma.
happened.
That's
So,
trauma.
and this is all in one conversation that I'm like, duh, like the two are connected. Okay,
Dot connect.
no, exactly. And so fast forward all these years, and he knows the work I do. So we use nutrition and everything to heal him of his eczema and all the mucus production, and everything. So he healed, no more allergies since we moved in together. So that's amazing, right? The power of food to heal the body. And
Yep.
so then fast forward to now, he's a beautiful man in his, 40s, but he's doing this work, and he's finally, because of the work he's doing, he's like, oh my gosh, my dad and mom never said I loved you. Right. But that was a parenting choice that they made because it was in a magazine in the 70s that you shouldn't raise whiny kids. So instead, what you do is you toughen them up by like not coddling them, like attachment, like you do the opposite of attachment parenting. Right.
Yeah.
But they weren't mean, they were loving. Right. So they were loving, but without, showing affection.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
even with myself, like when we had the babies, I was always so curious when his mom would say, wow, I never hugged the kids like that. And I would look at my husband and be like, are you hearing what's happening? And he still couldn't connect the dots. But now he's connecting them, and it's like it's hard to watch when you realize that actually this perfect life that you've made out for yourself is, might not have been meeting all of the needs, so like your emotional needs, right? And you thank gosh he has an amazing relationship, and like there's so much healing happening. So when you first said that at the beginning of the podcast, that I have had no trauma, of course my little like antennas are going up, being like,
Sure, everybody does. Yeah.
yeah. But I also trust you in the sense that you are, this work, you've checked in with yourself, you've been honest with yourself, and
Now,
that
I
you,
talk about I got bumped here and there,
yeah,
you know, but
emotional
by a
concussion.
coach, a teacher, a friend saying something. But I think what happened was because of the nurturing environment I'm growing up in, I always felt safe.
Yeah.
So even if I got a little dysregulated by what the teacher just said to me or what my friend had done, I came home and instantly regulated.
And isn't that the key though?
That
Is that,
that was trained to do that. My system got trained to get the bumps, right? But to re-regulate.
and do you think people, like for an adult who didn't grow up that way, because I do see this a lot. There's a lot of people who can't take bumps anymore. Like they're just like, they want their life to be trauma free, anxiety free, sadness free, suffering free. And, like speak to that a little bit, because I'm just really curious about
Yeah, so a lot of
adults.
times, like, I think it came down to what I was talking about is being able to regulate. I was able to regulate because I had the safe environment. And the most important people in my life, which are in control of that, right, were sort of the stable force. So I could get the little bumps outside, but if I was getting the bumps inside, say I had a great mom, but I had like my wife, she had a father that just was a raving, like he would lose his cool. So she was living in fear all the time. And her grandmother was a saint, but she couldn't override that much damage. Now, if all that damage was happening outside and she had the inside, right, regulation ability, then she would have done it different. She would have developed differently, which is what I had. But I didn't even have any big T trauma. I didn't know that my friends were being sexually abused. I didn't know that the teachers, I guess I was the kind of kid that they just didn't want to pick on because maybe they knew the family environment I had. I was the kind of kid that would talk. I was a confident child. So I remember and we didn't know it at the time, one of the principals who was abusing kids. I saw him at a hockey rink one night, and I was in grade 7 or 8, I think. And the next day at school, I got called down to the office. And everybody was like, "Oh, you're in trouble, right?" And Mr. Condi wanted to see me in the office. And I went down there, and he invites me into his office, and he closes the door, and he starts saying, "Oh, I saw you at the rink last night. You're a really good hockey player. And how do you like?" And he's asked me all these questions about hockey. And even though I was a little nervous because I'm a kid and it's a principal, right? I didn't come across, I don't think, as scared. So I answered his questions and I was a confident kid. But in the back of my mind, I'm going, this is odd.
Mm-hmm.
And so nothing happened. He didn't attempt anything or say anything. And then he said, oh, and I guess he looked at me and went like, this is not a kid I'm going to be able to intimidate. Right. So he sent me back and says, get a hall pass, so in case you get stopped on the way back to class. And I went home and told my mom. I said, something weird happened today. The next day, my father went into the school and said to that principal, don't you ever take my son out of a class to talk to him about hockey without my permission.
Right.
You think
So
that principal's going to pick on me? Not a chance.
not a chance. And this is exactly what Alexandra Ford, the woman and the previous podcast here on our show, said, is that these criminals, these sexual abusers, they're looking for the weakness in an individual. So it could be that they're very shy, they're insecure, maybe they have a bad family home. So what they'll come in and they'll meet the need that's not being met in that child's life or that individual's life. So they're searching, they're doing a scan, and they're like, oh, that's a resilient kid, exactly what you said, someone who talks a lot, we don't want them. So they have a checklist of what they're going through, and they can literally, it's like an antenna sticking out of these kids' heads where they're like, I'm going to go get that person.
That's
And
exactly what.
yeah, and it's full, it's predation, right? At the max. There's another thing that you said as well that it was interesting. I was just reading the other day, and it says, and I just want to read this because you talked about how safety is a requirement for, kids coming home and feeling like they can talk to the parents. If they don't feel safe, then they're never going to talk to you. So we have to create these safe environments. But also from a trauma perspective, it says that your environment being perceived as safe was one of the absolute number one requirements. This is coming out of a study for being able to heal from trauma. So safety is 100% important because you cannot resolve trauma if you do not feel safe.
Yep.
Yeah. So on both like that, we have to be creating these safe environments for individuals. And a lot of times there is no safety in a lot of kids' homes.
And that's what I talk about. Somebody said to me, what's the best advice you can give to a parent? I said, make your home safe. It's the place they should be able to come home and feel safe.
Yeah.
And I always did. I always felt safe. Did I sit and talk to my parents about every single thing going on? No. Right. But I knew I probably could.
Yeah.
Right. But, obviously, I don't want to share everything. Right. It was so funny. My sister just sent me a message today and I'd forgotten. She goes, I was just thinking about you today. And I remember how mad mom was when you were 16 and that woman at the tennis club forged her signature so you could go skydiving. And I said, I remember going skydiving. I remember this lady. I didn't remember mom knew. How did mom know that? Right. And she goes, I don't know how mom knew a lot of things, but she knew. Right.
Oh
And
my
it was
God.
like, I'd forgotten about that.
Yeah, that's beautiful. And you remind me too, it's funny because I think it's the most hilarious thing. I don't know if I've ever talked about it on this podcast, but so I learned this parenting technique. One, I love that parenting technique that seems so intuitive to your dad, but it's actually written in a book that when a child speaks negatively to another family member, and then you come in and you say, hey, you can't talk to that person that way. I love that person. They deserve respect, right? So you're not like, hey, don't talk like that, and then you ridicule, shame, blame, all of that. But you just tell them, I have standards in our house. So that's actually comes out of it's a beautiful technique in a parenting book. I can't remember which one it was. And we use it and works every time because the kid goes, you're right. Okay, I don't want to do that. But the other parenting technique that I remember, I don't know who told me, is that I gave my kids, each of them, when they were old enough to understand, and they were probably little, like 2, 3, 4. And I said, you get a free pass. And so I'm going to give you 5 of them, free passes, and you can use it anytime. Or I said, I'm going to give you a stack. I never said how much. And what the free pass means is you can tell me anything and I will not get upset. I will not react. I will not even ask you a question for 24 hours, one whole day. You can just tell me and I'll sit here neutral. And so my kids still use these free passes. It's like an unlimited supply, I guess. And my oldest one even drew out free passes and she'll hand me the coupon.
Oh, that's
And
great.
so then she'll tell me stuff. And some of the stuff that these kids tell me, I'm like, most kids don't tell their parents these things, but they have no problem doing it. And it's because I don't react,
Right.
you
Well,
know?
that's great though. That's great advice. And I look at it and I think, how did I not know my mom was mad? Because she didn't yell at me.
Yeah, it was safe.
My sister had to tell me. So she was probably upset, but she didn't yell at me, even though, like I couldn't go skydiving. I knew my mom would say, no, you can't go skydiving. Right. And so this woman, she was an older woman at the tennis club. And I was actually at the tennis pro at 16 at the club. So I felt mature.
Yeah.
And so she was like, let's go skydiving. She was, I think, 34. Right. And I'm like, okay, that sounds like a great idea. Right. It was really dumb.
Who is
And
this lady? That is hilarious.
yeah. And so I was just like, yeah, let's do it. And
Mhm.
I did. It was really dumb. Right. And so I knew my mom would say it's dumb and I wouldn't and she said, well, you have to have permission. Right. And I'm like, yeah, that's not happening. She goes, I'll sign it.
Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. Okay, so how do people work with you? Like, how do they get to work with you? Do you train other coaches? Like, we need to know the ins and outs of your business because I know there's going to be a lot of people that are like, I want to work with Dr. Dawn here. So how do they do that? Where do they go?
So if you come to our site, it's the inspiredperformanceinstitute.com. It gives you, there's a whole bunch of testimonials of people who have gone through post-traumatic stress, depression, anxiety, and they talk about how the program in literally hours. It's a 30-day program in terms of 4 hours is the process, and then 30 days of audios to sort of reset. You
Is
can
it
do
4 hours with you? They book an
4 hours
appointment.
with me,
Okay.
or I also have it digitally. So you can
Oh,
listen to 4 hours online, but you have to do the 4 hours because I want to get you into a very alpha theta brainwave state where the mind will do the updates.
mhm.
And so you can't break, you have to stay the 4 hours. But you can do it digitally through the online program, which is the most economical. I sometimes do it in groups where people can come and I can take 50 people in a room and take them through the same program and I don't even need to know what your trauma is.
Yeah.
I can clear the trauma without you telling me one word. So even if people come in individually and they have, say, a sexual assault, they don't want to sit there and start talking about it. So I'll say, I'm going to take you through a process. I'm looking for, if that event was a movie and they made a movie about what happened to you, I want the trailer.
Right.
I'm looking for the 2-minute trailer, right, that you can talk about, or I'll do it just all visually. And I don't need to know what it is. A lot of times I have no idea what their trauma was,
And
but
I
I can.
just want to speak to that if I can, because there's so much about what you do that's so similar to what I do, with the nutrition side is when I have somebody that comes to me, I don't need to know their disease. And in
No,
fact, I do, I get their blood work, I get their diagnosis, but it doesn't matter. It's why I do not take clients on one-on-one because we're not treating the disease, we're treating the entire body. We're building resiliency in the body and the disease melts away. So it doesn't matter what the disease is, right?
no.
So this approach of individualized medicine, and it's also on the therapeutic side for what I've seen and why I did degree in psychology, and it was the part that I was like, wow, all of this therapeutic work, you're just reinforcing the version of your story that you chose to remember. And then they say, how does that make you feel? And then you just reinforce it more because you're attaching present day feeling and emotion to that. So then
Yeah.
it's just constantly perpetuating the big T or the emotional concussion. So I do like that you address that. I appreciate that very much.
And we only do 2 or 3 events. And what I say is the brain will continue, right, to process. So the thalamus continues to process the data through the hippocampus, through the memory, even after we're finished. When you're at sleep at night, your mind will continue to clear trauma.
Right.
You just have to get it started. Once we get it started, it's like healing, right? If you come in with a broken leg, we reset it. The memory will start resetting all on its own. We just have to get it started. So they can, like I said, they can do one-on-one with me. They can do that. They do the digital program groups. We just shot the digital program in virtual reality. So that version is going to be sort of like you're sitting in the room with me in virtual reality. You can reach out and pick up stuff, and it's really cool. So
Oh my
that's going to be released shortly. And so that, and then every month we have a free webinar that you can come in and ask questions. If you've gone through the program, you have lifetime access to that, lifetime access to all our audios and materials. So, and people are loving the webinars because they can come in and they can just ask questions. Or if they miss it, they can send in a question ahead of time and I'll answer the question and then they can watch the recording.
Yeah, that's amazing. And that's a beautiful model as well. We offer that with our program because of the fact that humans aren't static. It's not like, oh, you're done and it's over. Goodbye. You bought the course, leave. Like things are going to come up. There's going to be little tweaks here and there. They're going to have questions. So we provide the same thing, lifetime access, and we do weekly group coaching so people can come in. And so, and people are like, but even after I'm healed, I'm like, yeah, after you're healed, come back. You're going to always have questions, and there's going to be other things that come up. So that's a really beautiful service. And I really wish more therapists out there, trainers, doctors, everybody who's working in any health space or any space at all would provide that to people, because it doesn't really take up much more of your time, but people are being well cared for and they're supported and it's a safe space to do it.
Yep. So
that is amazing. I just have so many more questions for you and I want to respect your time. I want to talk about, the Boston Marathon. I want to talk about what that looked like. There's so many pieces there, but I hope to have you back on the show again. And what is one piece of it, we always end shows like this. What is one piece of advice that you would give to somebody who is, they are dysregulated, their nervous systems are, dysregulated. They're not sure what to do. Yes, 100% sign up for your program. I just told everybody what the advice is, but what is a piece of advice that you have for them if they're feeling that way? They've been lost. They don't know what to do. What's one thing that you can say to them?
Is what I sort of say, which I think is very powerful, that there's nothing wrong with you and there's nothing wrong with your mind. If you've been told that you're dealing with these different issues, anxiety, depression, post-traumatic stress, there's nothing wrong with you. That's how our brains work. That's how our minds work, right? So there's a reason. So when people say, oh, I'm anxious, I'll go, why? As opposed to, oh, let's fix the anxiety or let's manage the anxiety. I say, let's figure out what would create your mind to be anxious. It doesn't become anxious for no reason, right? Which is the way they sort of describe, oh, you got a chemical imbalance in your brain. The first thing I'll say is, why would you have a chemical imbalance in your brain, right? That's not, our system isn't designed to malfunction. Something created the malfunction, right? And what I deal with in those cases is generally the trauma. What you're dealing with is the dysfunction is coming from a nutritional imbalance, right? Yeah. And so, but there's an answer. There's an answer for everything.
Yeah. And there is an answer for everything. And again, sometimes it is quite simple. Like I know you went through and you did your PhD. That's not a simple task. You researched a lot, you read a lot, you read many, many, many studies, carried out research on your own. And so it's, it is not at the end of the day that simple, but at the end of the that the tool that we have can be so simple, which is what you offer. And I love that. It's so important that people learn this. And are you training people in this as well? Can I ask you about that?
The next model we're going to, which we're just starting to develop, is train facilitators to facilitate the online program.
Right.
Way they don't, because there's a lot of nuance. There's a lot in my voice, the tone, everything that I sort of do is very purposeful. And it's not that I think I'm better than anybody else, but it took a long time to learn that. And as I know, we all do courses. You can't learn that in a course that easily. You would have to just do nothing but work on that. And that's not what people can afford to do. I could, right? That's how I developed it. So wouldn't it be easier if you could get the same effect, right? And just take people through it and you understand why I'm doing everything, but you don't have to do it exactly. For example, like EMDR. EMDR is a good practice. It takes a lot longer than what I do, right? But EMDR will work with the right practitioner.
Yes.
But if you've got a practitioner that doesn't know what they're doing or isn't well trained, somebody will come back and say, oh, EMDR was terrible. It didn't help me at all. Well, it wasn't EMDR. It may have been the practitioner didn't do it right.
Yeah, no, thank you for saying that. We just covered that in another show as well, being like, if you didn't like the yoga instructor, go to another class. It's not the yoga that you don't like, I promise you. You know, breathing
Exactly.
and moving your body is a beautiful thing. So it's, yeah, different studio, different instructor, you're going to be fine. Different style of yogas. No, I'm glad that you brought that up, because that's really important for people to understand. Because I think well, I know we're in a society of like one hill wonders and quick fixes, and we want that, and then we give up very quickly when we don't get the results on that first day. And again, it could just be the individual that you're working with, and relationship in any kind of therapeutic setting is so important. It's more important, I think, than even the technique itself, just like you were saying. So it's people need to understand that. And
That's why we like the facilitator model, because you could have a really good relationship with your therapist or whatever. And if they have a tool now that they can use without having to go through the years of training in it, right? It's the best of both worlds.
yeah, that's
And
awesome.
we know everybody gets the same treatment. It's identical.
Yeah, no, that's great. Are you publishing any studies on this?
We're doing a DNA study right now. So we're publishing how we're changing the way the genes express. So we did a brain mapping study, and we did pre and post, and I had people with anxiety, post-traumatic stress, depression, and panic attacks. I actually have a patent on how we can predict a panic attack up to an hour before and solve it. But anyway, the study we did on the brain mapping is we wanted to measure how we're changing the brain. So we did pre and post. And the gentleman who did the study with us was super skeptical. He said, I don't think you're going to get the changes that you think you're going to get. It's not easy to get that much change that quickly. He says, but I'll report the results, right? And you just accept the results. I said, that's fine. He said, he goes, if you get a 10% change in brain plasticity, I would consider that a home run. You know what we got? 46.
What?
In brain plasticity. That's how much the brain can change when you get the trauma out of there. So then we said, okay, let's do the DNA. And so now we're going to do pre and post on DNA and show all the different genetic markers that actually change, which are going to be immune system, neurotransmitters, inflammation, right? Neuroplasticity will start to change when you resolve the trauma. And we're going to publish that study. I'm excited about that.
That is amazing. And, I wish we had so much fun. I just want to dive into the science, because I think it's, I love that you teach the science. So we don't even need to, because you can just sign up for your course, learn the science, learn how this works. But, if anybody is listening that thinks like this is too good to be true, it's incredible that like the tiniest amount of nervous system stress, emotional stress, psychological stress on the body, it impacts your digestive lining, it impacts your organs, it impacts the way you detoxify your natural detoxifying pathways, it impacts the way you absorb nutrients, it impacts your immune system. Like every molecule, every cell in your body gets impacted by even the most minute amount of stress. Now you can have positive stress on the body, but we're talking about the stress that ends up in negative outcomes here. So it's the science around this is so incredible. And again, we're just little babies in this world, but you are advancing that knowledge. So I really appreciate you.
Well, that's one of the things that I talk about too, Nicolette, is that the reason why the system goes that way is because when we're under stress, think about it. If you're being chased by a lion, is there a need to do maintenance? No.
No.
Where's the energy going, right? To fight or flight,
Mm-hmm.
right? So your system is now prioritizing the energy. So here's one of the things that we found. This is why we call it a performance program. Is it actually affects the mitochondria,
Yes.
the ATP, the energy in the cells. So the energy is now being diverted to a different path in order for you to have more power to run or fight. So then it has less energy for maintenance, but it's only supposed to be until you get away from the lion.
Not
And
ongoing.
then it goes back into maintenance. But trauma keeps running in the background in memory. This is where the whole problem came in. This is what I found, is it's all coming in from memory. And when we did the brain mapping study, we saw the occipital lobe, right? The visual cortex is super active when people have post-traumatic stress. What does that mean? They're viewing something. What are they viewing? Memory.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
And
when
then they're
calm down.
depleting their ATP levels, and their body's using all that glucose for, managing that, as opposed to fighting an infection or healing the body from illness, or not even creating. That is amazing. Where can I want to see these images.
The brain study.
Yes.
I can get you the brain mapping study. We're just going to be publishing it now, so I'll
great.
send it to you.
Okay,
Yeah.
good. I'll wait for that. No worries. Yeah. No, I just was hoping that, I can't wait to dive into this. I'm very
I have all the information, but we're going to publish it now. So we've got we're writing up the study so we can publish it, and then we're going to start. We're just starting on the DNA one.
Amazing.
Yeah. It's
Well,
exciting.
thank you so much for taking the time out of your busy day to share this information with our audience. I'm blown away, and I am so grateful for the work that you do, because our world desperately needs this, what you're doing. So thank you so much for being on the show.
Well, thank you. It was great talking to you. I can see why you're successful. What a great personality you have. I'm sure your clients just love you.
The same as you, though. But I can see how much you love the work that you do, and that
You
really
do.
comes across. Like it's and it's refreshing for me, because I see you're doing it out of like a deep love for this, and excitement and joy, and all the things, and that what you're giving back to people. And I think that's why I have the energy that I do as well, because it's for exactly the same reason. So it takes one to know one. So thank you.
Awesome. Very good.
Yeah.
Well, thanks again, Nicolette.
Yeah, you are welcome, and I'll definitely be signing up for one of your programs just for myself, because just ignited a lot of stuff that I need to address as well, and I can't wait to learn more about your technique.
Beautiful. All
Yes.
right.
Okay, you have an amazing afternoon. Thank you again for your time.
You too.
Appreciate it.
You too. Thanks a lot.
Okay, bye.
Bye.
A massive thank you to Dr. Don Wood for sharing his groundbreaking work in this deeply personal story today. We covered the vital connection between our past experiences and our present health, and most importantly, the science-backed hope that we are not broken, but designed to heal. If this conversation about resetting your nervous system and reclaiming your health from trauma resonated with you, here's how you can take your next step. Subscribe to our channel on YouTube and hit the bell so you're notified the moment our next podcast is live. You can also follow the podcast on your favorite platform, whether that's Spotify or Apple Podcasts. You can also join our daily community by following us on Instagram and Facebook for insights, recipes, and updates. To explore Dr. Don's work and his 4-hour rebooting process, you can find him at the Inspired Performance Institute. All the links are below. And finally, if you're ready to begin your own healing journey with food, everything you need is linked below. Our Eat Real to Heal book, the step-by-step online course, and how to visit our organic plant-based cafe. Thank you for your time and for listening. Remember, healing is not about managing symptoms, but about updating the source code. Until next time.